Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Master Series. It's episode 40. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson-Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike, and good morning, subscribers. We are bringing an action-packed, not only good, but great, excellent, amazing episode of the Master Series today, Mike, with episode number 40.
It's number 40. I think the experience of listening to this will take you from a good to a great place. In fact, I think as moonshotters, you will be built to last.
That's very, very good because we are leaning in conveniently to one of our favorite authors and business leaders, Mr. Jim Collins, who, Mike, for over a quarter of a century, to be honest, I'm surprised it's not even longer than that. He has delved into what makes great companies tick. And he has revealed a number of business ideas, methodologies, and concepts that I think you and I and all of our listeners and members can really lean into today in the episode on Jim Collins to help us understand the values and the insights and the concepts that make good companies great, but also a few tips along the way that can help you and I as individuals also excel in the work that we do.
I would say, Mark, that Jim Collins is right up there in the Parthenon of moonshots, authors, and experts. The reason I can say that, Mark, is I remember living in Amsterdam and reading his book for the first time, and that's some 20 years ago now, and I am still using the concepts. In fact, it's so crazy. I think in the last week, some of the ideas we're going to talk about are at the very heart of the work I'm doing with my clients. And I think if you are listening to this as a member of the Moonshots Master Series, if you're on, it doesn't really matter if you're a startup or an enterprise, if you're trying to create some sort of transformation of a business, you're trying to figure out how we can actually be best in class, how you could perhaps maybe even be the best at what you do. This show is for you, and will even give you a bit of pep, a bit of motivation on why it's so important to think big. So if you're ready to take some of the most hard-earned lessons of what true greatness in business looks like, this is the Master Show for you, Mark.
That's exactly right. So maybe, Mike, with the insight of being great, helping all of us understand and learn from Mr. Jim Collins, why don't we start with one of his most well-known and lauded concepts that I know for a fact you and I have discussed quite a few times on the Moonshots podcast before. And that idea is all about getting the right people on the bus.
When Dick Cooley became chief executive of Wells Fargo in the late 1970s, he knew he would be facing the storm of deregulation. He knew that the entire banking industry would be upended when deregulation swept through. The board, understandably concerned, asked Cooley, "What is your vision? What is your strategy? Where will you lead us? How will you get us through the storm of deregulation?" And Cooley had a wonderful answer. "I don't know." Not only that, it's the wrong question. See, I am not going to first figure out where to drive this bus and then get people on the bus. No, I'm going to do it completely opposite. I am not going to figure out where to drive the bus until I've got the right people on the bus. And only once I've got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people on the key seats, then and only then will I turn my attention to the question of where we will drive this bus. The best executives we've studied always think first about who and then about what. It's not about just getting a great team. It's not about finding talent. It's not about getting great people. No. The key word is first. First get right people. First get the people on the bus. First think about who. Put who ahead of strategy, who ahead of tactics, who ahead of technology, who ahead of business ideas, who ahead of everything. First who, first who, first who, then what?
Oh my gosh, Mark. This is so triggering. I have all these memories of when I didn't get first who, then what together in businesses and the price that I paid for it. Okay. So let's break this down. I'm actually going to start with the trick inside of all of this, which is when you are trying to bring together a great team, trying to get everyone on the bus. And Mark, somebody doesn't want to get on the bus. And you're trying, like, hey, come on, we've got to transform, change, grow, adapt, pivot. And they're like, yeah, but, and complaining, and there's something not right. Or perhaps even they're just underperforming. They're not connected. There's a lack of energy. All of those symptoms we've seen. What's important about this idea from Jim Collins is we must equally get the right people on the bus as we must get the wrong people off the bus. And what's inside of that is something we've touched upon briefly before, but to me, the fair way to do this is say, hey, sounds like you can't get on the bus. So we can't be in no man's land here. So it sounds like you need to get off the bus. And that's not a judgment of you as an individual. Rather, there's just not a fit anymore. And that's okay. So we'll do our best to support you in whatever's next for you, but you need to get off the bus. Mark, the amount of times I delayed those conversations and they came back to hurt me. Where you're like, oh, I should have just like intervened. I knew this wasn't going to work months, maybe even years ago, and the consequences I paid. On the other hand, when I look at great teams I've been part of, I'm like, oh man, we quickly got everybody around the table, committed, and then we could figure out where we wanted to go. And this is so. It's not only an important thing, it should happen first, as he stressed. You honestly, I don't see it possible to build a high performance team until you've got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus. Mark, when all this conversation about buses, what's coming to mind?
Yeah, I mean, apart from obviously, paying your fare and sitting next to the window, the key things for me as being an individual who's been on the right teams where they've hired the right people and the right passengers are on the bus, the difference that you notice is people are more motivated.
Yeah.
They're more adaptable to change.
Right.
So not only in a world where AI and so on is changing, but also maybe pivots in the business direction. So, for example, hey, everyone, we don't necessarily need to focus on the strategy for this. We need to go out and look at the execution rather than people saying, hey, but I'm a strategist, I can't do this. Knowing that the right individuals are there in the room and they all have the same belief in the direction that the company's going and that they all want to work together, that pivot is a lot easier and actually maybe a lot more fun for them because they're interested in exploring the different challenges together.
Yes.
So I think there's motivation.
And there's no blame, right?
There's no blame. There's no animosity because they just know, hey, we're all in this together. So that shared experience is something that we can work on and experience together.
Yeah.
So I think once you've got the right people on the bus, there's patience, there's willingness to change and adaptability, there's motivation, but also, as we heard from Jim, it gives you that time and space to kind of figure out where you want to take that company because everyone's patient and willing to sit back and say, hey, you know what? That's okay. Let's go out and change. And that's what we all want to do. We all want to achieve greatness. So let's have that ability to go out and do it together.
And I think that when I think about trying to do this, we're always tempted to have the big idea, right? And invariably, it's not dropping elegantly from the sky to the CEO, and they are able to turn to the management and leadership team and say, I have all the answers, my dear followers. It's much dirtier and messier than that. And it tends to be like, oh, there's an inside over here and an inside over there. We connect the dots. Hang on, we're in the wrong business. And good to great. If you read the book, there's lots of great examples of companies that had the courage to make massive pivots because they got the right people around the table to figure out where they should go. So often we're compelled, like, oh, quick, we need an answer. We need an answer. What Jim's saying is, look, if you want to have the answer, you actually just have to start to make sure you have those people around the table. And because with the right people, they'll ask the right questions, they'll have the right discussions, they'll listen to each other, they'll support each other, challenge in a fair and open way. And from that due process almost, that's where you'll get ideas that will stand the test of time. And here's the other thing, Mark. If you do have the right people around the table, not only will the answer be good, but because you had good people around the table, they will all deeply be committed to that direction. Even better is even if they don't really agree exactly or wholly with the team's strategy, because there was due process with people that they respect, they can still commit. You know those classic detractors, Mark? Like they have the management meeting and then they come out and go, well, that was all a load of crap. This is never going to work, right? That doesn't happen. Even if the idea is something that they don't fully agree with, they can fully commit to it because it was a fair, open process with the right people. That's huge, Mark, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely massive. I've been in teams again where maybe there's one or two individuals that don't quite fit with the mindset, the shared mindset of the rest of the team. And actually, you notice them quite quickly, that thorn in your side. And what I've noticed is the knock-on and long-term effect of those individuals is the water becomes a little bit muddy. Maybe people are starting to question, okay, well, you're not pulling your weight, or you're actually pushing against this idea unnecessarily. And what it does is it becomes a little bit of a demotivator for those people who are right and have the shared positive mindset. So you're right, Mike. It really does have a knock-on effect quite substantially, not only for the business, but also for the team themselves, if you've got those wrong people on that team.
Yes. But here's something that is possible, and we've probably not seen it very often, but it exists. Well, let's say you, me, and all of our members, we're having a big meeting about the future shows we're going to record. And some of the people don't agree with some of the shows that we've chosen. However, they can fully commit to the program even if they only like 80% of the future shows because they had a chance to share their opinion, they were genuinely heard, and they understand the trade-offs we made for the greater good. So they're not detracting as soon as they come out of the Moonshots meeting saying, oh my God, that Mark Pearson guy, he's like talking about this and that, what an idiot. This, you can respectfully disagree and still commit to the program. That is the sign of a high performance team. And you only get that if you focused on first who, then what. Matt, we could go on and have a whole episode on this, but I feel like I did mention our members. I think it's only appropriate that we bring out the brass orchestra, the famous Mark Pearson Freeland trumpets, and pay the due respect.
You know what, Mike? You're right. I never realized that the Moonshots bus, has a horn. And you know what that horn sounds like? It sounds a little bit like this. Welcome on all of our passengers and people who are the right members on the right team. That is Bob, Niles, I Tripton, Dietmar, Morjang, Connor, Lisa, and Sid. Mr. Bonjour, Paul, Bird, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samola, and Barbara. Deborah, Lasse, Stephen, Craig, Ravi, Yvette, Raul, and Nicoada, Ingram, Dirk, Venkata, Marco, Jet, Roger, Steph, and Raw. Nimalen, Diana, Christoph, and Denise. Laura, Smitty, Corey, and Daniela, Mike, Antonio, Zachary, and Austin, Fred, Ola, Andy, Diana, Margie, Ron, Jasper, Fabian, Guhong, and Edward. Guys, thank you so much. We are pleased. No, we are privileged to have you guys with us on the Moonshots bus. We know that you take a little bit of inspiration from each of our shows, and we have ears that are wide open to your feedback. If you want a show or you think that you've got a little bit of feedback for us, make sure to hit us up at Moonshots, hello@moonshots.io. But in the meantime, we are so thankful to have you here with us.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you to you, all of our members. And in service to you, we have another big idea from the author, Jim Collins. And this one is going to be, if you want to figure out how to have a long-term, highly scalable, profitable business, this next clip that Mark's going to unleash, this is the one.
That's right. This next clip is all about sustained momentum and a concept that became very, very well known following the book that we also just heard about, Good to Great, which is all about the flywheel, Mike.
A flywheel is not a list of action steps drawn as a circle. No, it has to have an underlying logic such that if you hit component A, you can't help but go to component B. And if you get component B, you can't help but go to component C. And if you hit component C, you can't help but go to D. Let's think about the Amazon flywheel as they came out of the dot-com. If you lower prices on more things, you can't help but increase customer visits. And if you increase customer visits, you can't help but get more third-party sellers. And if you get more third-party sellers, you can't help but expand the store and extend distribution. And if you do that, you can't help but increase economies of scale. And if you do that, then you can't help but have the chance to lower prices on more offerings and drive the flywheel around. That's how any flywheel truly turns. Inexorable, underlying momentum.
I think this is like every CEO and founder's dream, isn't it, Mark? Like, that's just like, yeah, I'll have some of that. It's very alluring what he just explained, isn't it, Mark, this flywheel effect?
Yeah, the flywheel effect is, as it stands out to me, Mike, a great demonstration of applying a concept that we've kind of learned about on the Moonshot Show before about sustained effort, resilience over the hard times, but specifically applied, obviously, to businesses. And what Jim's calling out here is that those great businesses that succeed are the ones that don't get put off over time. And what I mean by that is they start to maybe see a little bit of success. Maybe they feel a little bit confident in the work that they're doing. Maybe they're seeing great sales or great customer bases, but then maybe it flatlines, maybe even it declines. Instead of then turning off the taps and going to do something else, instead they keep on persevering. They know the benefit of the foundation of work that they've already done. It's hard to start a flywheel, isn't it? So rather than leave that flywheel and go and start pushing a new one, instead keep on turning it, keep on going. And I think that visualization of a flywheel for me is so valuable because it really demonstrates the work that you and I as individuals, as well as the businesses that we work in, as well as Amazon, Google, etc., are really doing in our world today. It just takes that sustained effort and momentum, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's all in service to a bigger idea. Like Netflix, for example, it has this real commitment to storytelling, right? Because when they started out, the beginning of their flywheel was the licensing of existing television shows. And then they're like, hey, in service of the storytelling, we'll continue to that, but we'll add to the flywheel our own originals. So that's where Stranger Things, House of Cards all come from, because they produced those shows, those movies themselves. And then what's interesting, if you look at Amazon, they were always committed to like an obsessive level of customer convenience. So they started with selling books, and have a look now, today, the businesses that they are in. Prime, advertising, third-party sellers. Oh, did I mention they sell a little bit more than books these days? So the point here is these are crazy flywheels that they've got spinning. And actually, Jim gives us the formula in the book to do so. And it really comes down to this. You have this big mission, passion, storytelling in the case of Netflix, customer convenience in the example of Amazon. And then as you continue to do one thing, It's like a chocolate cake, Mark. You have this great, yummy foundation. Then you put the cream in the middle. Oh, and like cream plus the foundation, it's 1 + 1 = 3. And then you put the icing on the top, and it's 1 + 1 + 1 equals like 10. It's just out of control good. That's really what we see with businesses like Amazon. And if you look at the valuation of OpenAI, the future promise of them is that they will have a flywheel. And you can also say the same for Nvidia as well. They've definitely got potential for a multi-layered chocolate cake flywheel effect. Now, the only way to realize that is the resilience you talked about, Mark, but it's also the learning. Because in all of the companies we just mentioned, there are many failures, and that's okay. They learned from it, right? They learned from it. And that's how, if you go back to the first idea, if you've got great people on the bus, they're asking the question, they're not blaming, they're learning together, getting better together, putting that flywheel to effect. So, Mark, I'm going to pitch you this. With these first two ideas, this is like the biggest homework assignment for any CEO, founder, entrepreneur, or anyone who wants to make their company better. We could just pens down right now. Job done.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much work to do on these two ideas. I'm a bit scared to unleash the other two clips.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And, to build on this idea of the flywheel and all the companies you've just mentioned, I think the reason why they are so renowned for having such impressive talent, impressive employees and so on, is because real people want to see real results. And when those companies that you've just listed, when they start making those changes and when those flywheels are turning and the products and the services and the results are happening, you know what it does? It motivates people to keep on working and have their shoulder to the grindstone, to that flywheel. So that satisfaction, that excitement that we all get when something kind of works, I think comes from that sustained effort, doesn't
Oh,
it?
totally.
It keeps on going.
Totally. Because if you think about it, all we're really saying is, no music artist becomes a hit overnight. No great business becomes dominant overnight. So it is about continuous learning with the right people. It's about doing the right thing. In terms of, that chocolate cake, just imagine those layers going on top of each other. But Mark, we ain't stopping there. We've got more Jim Collins wisdom. And the next one, oh my gosh, this next one, it's like the Ikigai process for a company. So why don't you set it up for us?
Yeah, we've pitched the idea of chocolate cakes. Now let's get out into the garden. This time we're going to be understanding a little bit about, as Mike's just said, the Ikigai businesses with Jim Collins's idea of the hedgehog concept.
Now, when we took all our companies, we began to ask the question, well, is there any pattern to the one big thing that they all followed? Is there any sort of systematic framework that would explain it? And when we laid out all the information, what we found and saw in the mess of data was an underlying framework of 3 intersecting circles. And that what a really good hedgehog concept reflects is deep understanding of each of these 3 circles. Circle number 1, what you are deeply passionate about. And nothing great can happen without beginning first with passion. And if you're not passionate, you can't possibly make it great. Circle number 2 is the lower left circle, and this is about understanding what you can be the best in the world at, and equally what you cannot be the best in the world at. Not what you hope to be the best at, not what you aim to be the best at, but what you actually can be the best at. And then the third circle, bottom right, is what drives your economic engine. And we found in our research for corporations that they all got a simple, penetrating, underlying insight, a single ratio. If you could increase one ratio above all other ratios, profit per X, what 1X would give you the highest rate of return over time? And it varies from company to company. So standing back then, a hedgehog concept is when you find the intersection of what you are passionate about, what you can be the best in the world at, and what best drives your economic engine, preferably consistent with a single ratio of profit per X.
Okay. Okay. So what's happening here, Mark? It's literally ikigai for a business. So, let's just play out the Amazon one because I think that's one we can all relate to. So, Amazon is like customer obsession, customer focus, customer experience. That's definitely like their driving passion. Now, I think if Cal Newport and others were listening to this, they would argue a little bit the word passion. You could change that for what matters to you, what are you excited about, what you care about, what you're deeply curious about, but stuff that resonates with you, what drives your motivation engine. Now, with the best in the world piece for Amazon, you could say that they're really good at technology, and you would be correct. But here's the interesting thing, Mark. I actually think it's technology and efficiency. If you think about how efficiently they enable you to shop, even the idea that you could shop one place with all the books in the world 20 years ago, that was crazy efficiency because you and I both remember a day when Amazon didn't exist and you would go. I viscerally remember in search of a book in Sydney when I was a young teenager. It would be normal to visit a couple of different bookstores trying to find a book. That was a very normal thing. You didn't need to do that anymore. That is so efficient. So I think there's a story of, technology and efficiency is what they're so good at. Think about Amazon Prime. It's like magic. You order something and you're like, I just clicked buy, but was that the doorbell? Was that the ring going off? And so I think that's best in the world. Now, what happens is this economic engine in the case of Amazon works a bit like this because it has so many shoppers on the platform. It has so many sellers on the platform, which means it can have so many delivery services, which means it can offer you value add services like Prime Video. Because of Prime Video, they get more customers. Because they have more customers, they get more sellers, and the flywheel spins. So at any of these, if you add value in any of these three areas of their hedgehog concept, if you think about a flywheel, it makes the other one better. So they know that they can, as they scale, offer back to us customers lower prices and more value. And that's why as a retailer, they're like eating the world. And you could pick that up and you could say exactly the same for Google and Netflix in their respective areas. They have the same hedgehog concepts working. Google Search, Google Docs, YouTube, Netflix, originals, games, oh, and classic TV shows and movies. You see what I mean? Like you start to see the pattern. This is the hedgehog concept. So you can actually design a business towards this. Don't you find that the most exciting idea, Mark? Like with your entrepreneurial hat, that you can actually design a company to behave like that. You can design something that can be that successful. There's actually a recipe.
I mean, it makes it sound pretty simple, but the truth is, Mike, it isn't necessarily a simplistic approach. It's just one that really helps individuals, business leaders, and entrepreneurs, like we've talked about on the Moonshot show with Ikigai in the past, a blueprint, as you will, to really lean into, okay, well, what is it that I'm really good at and what can we create in the world that's going to drive difference as well as economic drive?
Yep.
So you're right. To name all of those companies that you've just gone through, they've all done that quite simplistic approach, so to speak, whereby they've probably printed up, Jim Collins's hedgehog circles and really leaned into those awareness structures. And I think if we've thought about getting the right people on the bus, we've thought about now kind of understanding our why. you're really creating this disciplined approach to building a company as an entrepreneur into a world where you can make a difference and stand out against the competition. And I think we've all seen different businesses that haven't really had that strategic approach. They come and go, don't they?
That's right.
There's many businesses I've seen over the years, and like you say, including maybe even some bookshops now that can't keep up with the innovation and the speed of Amazon. And I think it's a brutal fact that they
Yes.
just can't confront the changing ecosystem.
So what comes to mind is like two companies, Intel and Boeing. And what's interesting about those guys is they don't seem to have been learning. So Intel missed mobile, missed crypto, missed AI. I mean, it was more than a decade ago, you used to see those little stickers on your laptop saying an Intel inside. And look, Boeing has had so many famous failures. I don't even need to get into all of those. But here's the interesting thing, Mark. I've got a little list here that I want to share with you just for some kicks. And what this list does is I've got a list of the failures of some of these companies we've been mentioning. And I want to tell you about this list and we can chat about them. Because the interesting thing is, I mentioned all the failures of Intel and some of those of Boeing, but it's this knowing your hedgehog, knowing your flywheel. It's the first who, then what. This is what's so different because Amazon had some failings, Mark. Do you remember? This was a shocker. The Amazon Fire Phone, shopping in 3D. Do you remember that one?
You know what? I actually do remember the Fire Phone. I might have even tried to do a marketing campaign with them for that phone.
Okay. Quick, we'll move on then. Okay.
Yeah, quick.
Amazon auctions. You'll remember that eBay was really big around 99, 2000. Amazon tried to do auctions, failed terribly. But here's the point I'm going to make. They learned from these things. So actually, the difference between Intel and Amazon is not that Intel made all these mistakes and Amazon was perfect. It was that Amazon was able to learn from their mistakes. Okay, let's have some more fun. Okay, I got some good ones here. Okay, Netflix launched. Do you remember Quickster when they tried to separate the DVD business from the streaming business?
Yes, I think I do actually. I don't really remember it because it sort of disappeared.
Well, it's 2011, so the internet's alive and well. So they said, okay, internet's going to take over. So we're going to call it a different name, the old DVD business, and completely separate it. And it was so poorly received that it didn't even last 6 months. And they branded it, they launched it, they did everything. And Netflix canceled it all and then reintegrated the DVD and the streaming business. Can you believe it? But yet they learned from it. Okay. They
They
also
learned from it.
tried,
That's
yep.
the insight there, isn't it?
Right. So again, here they tried to expand in 2017 into China, failed massively, canceled the whole thing. Okay, quickly, Google. There was Google Glass. Remember the most hyped product in the universe? Gone. They tried to get into social at Google, Google Plus.
Oh, Google Plus. I do remember Google Plus.
And then, we can go on and on with this. But here's the interesting thing. So we've mentioned, Google and Netflix and Amazon that have great hedgehogs, have great flywheels, but they also made mistakes. So what is the difference then between Boeing and Intel, who are in big trouble, is that they got in the innovator's dilemma. They were doing one thing and they failed to have that growth mindset, that learning approach to go into other areas. They didn't have first who, then what. They weren't sure of their flywheel effect. They weren't leveraging into the right areas. And most importantly, they weren't focusing on what they're good at. Because in all of these, take Google Plus. Google were able to admit, they're like, you know what, guys, we don't get social. They tried to build one from scratch. They had gazillions of users and it just didn't work. And you know what? Social is a paradigm that is very different to search. So when you think about it, if you've got like all these great search guys or you're building Google Docs, then maybe making Facebook would be pretty hard. And if you think about it, Facebook, they didn't even make WhatsApp. That was someone else. They didn't even make Instagram. That was somebody else. So you can see that at some point, there are things that you cannot be the best in the world at. And what's really interesting is Intel and Boeing got into all these businesses despite having a heritage in one area, but they could not be good, they could not be great in two. And that's them breaking their flywheel. Isn't that fascinating just to map that out?
Yeah, you're right. And it's so fun looking at all those past iterations of businesses leaning into different sectors. I mean, as you were talking about the Amazon one, I started thinking, oh, well, hang on. If Amazon are now doing, or they failed with Amazon auctions, eBay, I know, are now leaning into having direct relationships between the seller and the buyer rather than just auctions. So the prevailing buy it now approach, you can now go and buy a product straight away from a seller. So it's becoming a little bit more like Amazon instead. So the auction part of the business is obviously continuing, but they also lean into eBay ads, eBay direct sales. So whatever doesn't work for one business, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work for the other.
Yeah.
So as you point out, they've all got to go through this process of testing it, seeing what sticks.
Yes.
Just because it doesn't work for your competitors, hey, it might work for our customers instead.
So I want to take your eBay example. So when we were talking about Netflix and we compare eBay to Netflix, we know the folks at Netflix are all about storytelling, right? And streaming and originals, licensing, gaming, they're all part of experiencing stories, right? Amazon's all about customer centricity, and anything that serves that flywheel, great, let's do it. I bet you, if you think about the struggles of eBay, do you remember they bought PayPal and then they had to spin it out again? Like, I think eBay is a company who's really trying to discover its hedgehog concept. What are they passionate about, right? What's their economic engine? And I think auctions is not enough. So if any of our members want a homework assignment, I would think about, well, what can they be the best in the world? What do they mean? Because there's something about connecting buyers and sellers that they could probably own, but they got to go figure that out. And if you look at the success stories that have used the Jim Collins ideas, they had the right people to figure it out. And it's so important that despite all of the strategic rigor, there's also this emotional, and perhaps even best said, it's this growth mindset. We're really focused on things such as resilience and learning. And Mark, what's so exciting is I think you've got one more knockout punch for us when it comes to clips.
Look, I think all of these clips so far today, Mike, in our episode on Jim Collins have been knockout clips. But you're right. This next one, I think, is going to speak to all of us who have a drive around productivity as well as long-term success. So the next concept we're going to hear from JC, from Jim, is a concept that certainly all of us are probably aware of, and that's BHAGs. So let's hear from Jim telling us quite an interesting, and I promise all of our members and listeners, I want to hear more about this clip. Lean into this, enjoy Jim telling us the story about how a big, hairy, audacious goal doesn't necessarily have to always be achievable.
On May 15 of 2007, I sat on the side of El Capitan in Yosemite Valley, rock climbing with a young man named Tommy Caldwell. Tommy is the greatest free climber of all time in the environment of El Capitan. And we started talking about BHAGs. BHAG is a term that goes back to the book Built to Last, which I co-authored with my dear mentor and friend, Jerry Porras. And it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And Tommy asked me a question. Jim, this BHAG thing, this hairy thing, does a BHAG have to be achievable? Why do you ask? I have this idea for a climb. And looking out across the side of El Cap, we could see the alabaster smooth wall, catching early morning light, called the Dawn Wall. And to get a feel for El Capitan, I'd like you to imagine standing at the base of the Empire State Building. And then stack another one, and then another half of one, and look up, and you get the sense for the height. Now make it a mile wide. You get a sense for the scale of this thing. And it is vertical and overhanging. Tommy's idea was to free climb the Dawn Wall, the smoothest, most beautiful, spectacular, terrifying part of the wall. To free climb means you do use ropes, but they're only there as safety devices. You have to move up every single part of the climb under your own power of fingers and toes and hands. Some of the holds on the Dawn Wall are so small that it is easier to see them at night by headlamp when you can get a little bit of contrast than in the glare of daylight when it makes it very hard to see the hold. Imagine that, holds so small you can't see them in sunlight, so you need to see them at night by headlamp. These are small holds, and it's on a vertical wall, and he's going to free climb this. It would be the hardest big wall free climb in history. But I don't know if I could do it, he thought to himself, and he said out loud, it might have to wait for a future generation. I said, well, Tommy, one thing I know is if you know for certain that you will do the Dawn Wall, then it's not a BHAG. Fast forward 5 years to the summer of 2012. And I brought Tommy with me on one of my visits to West Point to engage in a leadership seminar with the West Point rock climbing team. And Tommy had committed to the BHAG to free climb the Dawn Wall. And by the time we were flying out to West Point together, he had accumulated nothing other than an impressive record of failure on the Dawn Wall. He kept failing. For 4 years, he'd been failing. He kept failing to stick the dyno move. Imagine taking a pencil, right, and putting it up against the wall, and that's your handhold. And you literally grab that and you throw yourself sideways 7 feet, nothing touching, no hands, no feet, like some sort of a tree monkey, 7 feet sideways, 1,000 feet above the ground, and grab another little hold. And it's not even the hardest part of the pitch. And I asked Tommy, I said, it's been 4 years. You've just sort of failing and failing and failing. Why do you go back? You're the most accomplished free climber of your generation, and now all you're getting is failure. You don't understand, Jim. I am not failing. I'm growing. And that is the point of the climb. It is making me stronger.
Oh, Mark. I mean, this is the Braveheart moment, huh?
I love that clip. You know, it's such I can visualize the story from Jim. He's so eloquent and he's sitting there with Tommy Caldwell. But the story of success coming from that ability to recognize failure is just so valuable to us, isn't it? In a business setting as well as entrepreneurs and team members.
It's, to me, Mark, I mean, Carol Dweck would just be nodding in violent agreement on that. I think important distinctions that were made there, if it's very realistic, it's not a BHAG, right?
Yeah.
It's got to have some stretch in it. So I thought what I might do is I'll read to you the BHAGs. We've talked about 3 companies, Amazon, Netflix, and Google a lot. I'll read you their BHAGs, and we can riff a bit on those because I think they give us a good clue to growth. So Amazon's BHAG is to become the Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Okay, so that's Amazon. Netflix, to become the world's leading entertainment company providing exceptional original content that transcends cultural and language barriers. Whew, that's a big one. That one's really big. And Google, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Not all of those are a walk in the park.
I mean, I'd say that all of them are intimidating to the nth degree.
Yeah, so let me point out the mission impossible nature of each of those. Amazon, they talk about where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy. Anything. Ain't no just books here.
Anything in the world.
Okay. Netflix. Yeah, they want to provide exceptional content, right? But it's not just for good old US of A. They want to transcend cultural and language barriers.
So a
That is
place in
so,
every market.
so tricky. I mean, there's only been a few, there's the Heist from Spain, Squid Games that have transcended,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
But they're rare. Maybe Stranger Things as well did, but Star Wars, those kind of franchises, there's not a lot that truly transcend. And then if you think about it, particularly in mind with all of the knowledge that's going online, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, oh my gosh, that's a big mission. If you just think about the petabytes of data that get made every day, and you have to index that stuff.
Yeah, and it's just going to keep on growing. I don't know who's got the harder job, but I'd say that Google, that's pretty ambitious. But
I
I
don't
think
know.
you're right. And what a great exercise to come back to those three companies as we visited them throughout the show, because you're right. Without having that slightly ambitious, let's call it maybe even impossible, doesn't matter, goal at the end of their pathways, that's what drives them and helps keep them consistent on that same path, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
helps Google stay within that information highway, working towards that incredibly ambitious, big, hairy gorilla goal.
And to reveal a secret, like many years in, Mark, this is the whole idea behind the show. That's these BHAGs. They are, wait for it, moonshots.
They are all moonshots. And I'll tell you what, though, Mike, I don't think we'd have as many Patreon subscribers if the podcast was called BHAGs. Um, but I love that. I love that link. Actually, you're totally right. They are all moonshot goals, aren't they?
They are. They are. And, when JFK sat there in the 60s and said, hey, we're going to send a guy to the moon, people are like, damn, he's crazy.
Mm, mm,
But they did it.
mm.
But they did it. So even if it does sound like Mission Impossible, the fact that you're open to that challenge, man, it just opens up the world to you. But here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing. If you are applying all the moonshots lessons, resilience, serving others, learning, the obstacle is the way, the compounding, all of those massive lessons, you will be amazed if you stay at it, not just for weeks, not just for months, but for years and years, for even a lifetime. Because in the end, Mark, so few people stick at things for even a year. So if you do it for a couple of years, chances are you're way closer to your BHAG, you're way closer to your moonshot being realized than you even know.
And with the visualization of that flywheel, Mike, I feel like we've really done some justice in leaning into Jim Collins today, haven't we?
We really have. So what's your homework assignment coming out of this one, Mark?
Well, look, I like the sentiment you just shared. It takes time. So I think a combination, I'm going to be a bit cheeky. I think the combination of that flywheel visualization, of staying at something, going beyond that kind of 12-month, 18, 2-year state, in order to try and reach that big, hairy, audacious goal. A little bit maybe utilizing some of the lessons we know from Cal Newport. Have a goal every day, week, month, year, in order to try and help you work towards it. I think is kind of going to be my homework. So a little bit of long-term planning to try and get myself maybe into space. I don't know. What about you, Mike? What's your homework following?
I think my homework might be a little humbler. I think I'm just going to really return to this hedgehog concept, right? I really love Ikigai, and I really want to ingest the hedgehog concept to the same degree. I think there's a lot inside of that. Mark, a huge thank you to you. These were great clips. And a big thank you to you, our members, whether you're listening, whether you're watching. We're super grateful, and we're also super delighted to share with you the lessons of Jim Collins, superstar author, here in Master Series number 40. And we had 4 big ideas, which truly are the biggest homework assignment ever. First who, then what, when you're building the team. And start looking for the flywheel effect. Start putting the layers on the chocolate cake. And as you're doing that, ask yourself about your hedgehog concept. What's the intersection between your economic engine, between what you can be the best at the world at, what your passion is? And if you do that, you can go out and dream big and have a big, hairy, audacious goal. Said differently, create a vision, fight for a better future, and you will be on a journey of personal growth for yourself and your team. And I tell you what, that sounds good to us here at the Moonshots Master Series. That's a wrap.